My name is Jerm. This is Germ Warfare, the battle of ideas.
I am a bit sick, so please, guys, do the heavy lifting, do most of the talking, so that I can copy you, Charles, and blow
Ask
my
the
nose
right
to the side.
questions that we made.
Well, actually, I've got seasonal flu, so winter has pretty much officially begun here. It's raining cats and dogs. I wonder where that term comes from, cats and dogs. But anyway, it's raining cats and dogs, and it's pretty cold. Not cold in UK terms. We have to be fair here. This is still quite Mediterranean, I suppose. But for me, it's cold. Anyway, I've been eating chicken soup, something we all were told growing up. Do you think it's just an urban myth?
Charles is going to have to answer that one.
No, I did. Well, I think my default is that with those sorts of things, unless they've been quite clearly crafted by government or agents working alongside, like an apple a day keeps the doctor away, which is quite clearly rubbish. So I would say anything that gets dismissed as being folklore or something that's sort of without foundation absolutely always has foundation. In fact, because at this time of year in the UK, we're entering that period of time where we're either going to get in general terms, we're either going to get a dry season or a wet season. And the way that country folk determine the outcome is by looking at which of our two native trees, the oak or the ash, comes out first. So if it's the ash before the oak, you're in for a soak, and if it's the oak before the ash, you're in for a splash. So you get less rain, and it is amazing. It does seem to be borne out year on year. It's very, very interesting. So this stuff, and I would lump chicken soup in with or chicken broth. I would lump in with that kind of wisdom, because it's just, it's dismissed as law. And in fact, to go further on this, which I can probably for hours, luckily for you, the defining text, the definitive text on this, which is just so charmingly written, is a book by a chap called Dr. Jarvis, and it's something. What is it? So it's called something like Notes from a New England Doctor, anyway. Basically, he's written in the 1950s, I think. An American who had trained absolute mainstream medical training and moved to Vermont and set up a small country practice, and he was just completely bemused by patients of his that came and said, "Look, I've got a bit of this, that, and the other." Toothache, whatever, and I've been chewing the bark of this, or I've been sort of, boiling up the leaves of that. And he had no time for it initially. He just said, "What the heck?" And then, because this is back in the 50s, he wasn't pill pushing, and therefore he would see whether or not these people did actually get better. And they did. And he came to realize that in actual fact, these people knew far more than he did. And to his absolute credit, he therefore followed where it was that they had gone, and he began to look at it in a more scientific fashion. And most of his research was concerned with apple cider vinegar and as far as he could work out, perceived benefits of consuming it in so many different respects. And he tried it because obviously it was a farming community, and so whether it was to do with sort of infertility or this, that, and the other. Anyway, I'm clearly summarizing a lot, but it was very, very interesting. But I think the main point to make is that he was somebody who fully acknowledged that his mainstream medical training, and this is not just to have a pop at medics, but he was humble enough to realize that what he'd been taught, whilst there might have been some benefit to it, was absolutely not the whole picture. And therefore, listening to people who do say things like, well, if you are undergoing what does get described as seasonal flu, then taking a chicken broth makes sense. I mean, there will be a basis for that. Whether we can ever determine it's a different thing, and I think this is where a lot of people sort of teeter on the brink, because it's plunging into the unknown. If you say, well, because if we're to get personal about it, my belief is that every single mainstream drug creation is harmful. I do not believe there's a single And I know there'll be people, oh no, but what about this? What about aspirin? What about whatever? No, I don't, I just, it's fine. It's just my own view. I'm not suggesting you have to adopt my view. In fact, probably you shouldn't with anything. But I would put it that nothing created in a lab can do you any good, and that's why we were given the natural world. And it's just, to me, it's just so utterly logical if you think about it like that. Anyway, so the problem is that if I say to you, well, rather than taking aspirin, if you were to either do nothing or chew the bark of whatever, but you can't actually explain what it is about chewing the bark that has created the effect, or that you have just got better, then that for a lot of people still presents a problem because they want an explanation. Well, I'm frankly, I don't need one. And I think if you can adopt a mindset where you just know you're going to get better, then that is well over half the battle. And this is where the modern medical propaganda and establishment is so incredibly problematic, because at its front end is the suggestion there's got to be something wrong with you. Why really? And if symptoms are really an expression of recovery, of healing, which I believe they are, then you're already getting there. So anyway, sorry, that was probably a bit more than you were bargaining for.
I think before we move on, we've got to know the difference between soup and broth.
Okay.
That's very amusing, because to me, in literary terms, the word broth to me sounds as though it's something really thick, and I cannot. This is probably it's one of the problems I have with the English language. In actual fact, broth isn't. Broth is a thin. It is a thin soup. So I suppose soup. I don't know, generic term, tending to be a sort of thicker creation, whereas a broth specifically is a thinner iteration of soup. I mean, I don't know. I fully concede. I can't. All right, go on.
I've just looked it up. A broth is a flavorful liquid created by simmering meat, bones, or vegetables in water. It is often seasoned and can be consumed on its own. Soup is a more complete dish. Typically uses broth or stock as its liquid base.
Yes, all right. Yeah.
Fine.
Good.
So you can use.
I mean, on what Charles just said, I largely agree with that. I think there are instances when people are experiencing health challenges which are, beyond the norm, which those people absolutely benefit from. Pharmaceutical intervention. I think the cases of that, though, are very rare. I think that if we, what was the other point I was going to make? The one area I think where, of course, people would, we've mentioned this before, where people would really struggle with what Charles just said is pain relief. Now, Charles, I know, argues that you shouldn't be. But of course, for many people, that would be a major challenge. So, and pain can be something which is just so debilitating that you can't function in your day-to-day life. So I think there are two areas where there perhaps is justification for the majority of things. I mean, frankly, my experience with the medical profession is dire, because I have been to see the doctor, since I was a young adult. I think I've been to see a doctor 3 times in the last 40 years. Sorry, I'm giving away too much there. But, and in those 3 cases, I came away feeling utterly unimpressed, in the sense that, there was one point I had this, chesty cough that I just could not get rid of, and it was there for weeks and weeks, and so I eventually gave up and went to see the quack, and I use that word deliberately. And the first thing he did was search Google, and I just thought, what am I doing here? And he gave me a prescription for some inhaler thing, which I threw straight in the bin. I didn't redeem the prescription at the pharmacy. So, basically, from that, well, not from that point. From the beginning, I have been highly skeptical about the capability of GPs at the very least. I suppose the other area where some kind of medical intervention is required is with emergency care, and well, maybe but pharmaceuticals maybe aren't necessarily the part and parcel of that. Anyway, that's my thoughts on it, Charles. I don't know what you would say about that.
No,
hold on. Sorry, Jerm, go on.
No, I was going to say, if you get a migraine, how do you pronounce it? Migraine, is that the correct pronunciation? I get one of those on average once a year, and it completely breaks you. That's it. You can do nothing. I don't know if you ever get those, but at some point you just go, I can't anymore. I need an aspirin.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think where I was going to go back to was the qualification, and this is the for me. This is the oh gosh, what do you call it? What's the cosmetics? That's it. It's the cosmetic thing. The cosmetic industry, as far as I can work out, relies on once you put one thing on your face, you've got to put another thing on your face. So you put the thing on, and then you've got to buy the product that takes it off, and that's how it works. So that's my very basic understanding of the entire cosmetics industry. I mean, apart from the fact that it's a bit of a mystery to me as to why anyone wants to do either of those things. But anyway, so my position on the pharmaceuticals, I totally agree, Mike, with what you're saying. But I suppose where I'm winding the clock back to is the point before somebody said, oh yes, I'll have some of that refined sugar and I'll have some of that whatever. Okay, I don't know because I wasn't there, but I'm putting it that the sorts of things that we think we need pharmaceutical products for conditions are, well, in the words of Dr. Bateka, who's Professor Bateka, the Russian scientist who designed his method of breathing, because he worked out that over the years people had lost the ability to retain carbon dioxide within the body. Sorry, we're veering off on another kind of tangent, but the point is he referred to what are the diseases of civilization. And so all the types of ailment now that we typically think of as being dealt with, cured, ameliorated, whatever, by pharmaceutical products, we shouldn't have in the first place. And they are to do with the way in which we mistreat ourselves. And I think you see exactly the same thing in animals. And, let's say bird flu. It doesn't actually matter whether the bird flu exists as a virus or not. The point is that commercial poultry, kept in those conditions in enormous great sheds where they never get to see the light of day and they're just trampling on top of each other, of course they're going to get ill. I mean, it's just not, if we can see that in birds, why can't we see it in humans? So that's really what I mean. Pain relief, yes, again, that is a tricky one, and everyone has their own take on it. In my own experience, the stronger types of pain relief, the sort of the opioid pain things, which are meant to be the top end thing, in my own experience, actually don't really do anything. And they just make you feel a bit odd. So I've never really had any time for them, and I would oddly prefer the alternative. But it's all a question of I suppose separating how you feel. Like, Jerm, you're talking about a migraine. I mean, effectively, I think what you're talking about really is the impact that has on your life. When that happens to you, you can't work, you can't spend time with your family. You can't do anything. Now, we live in a world where not being able to do stuff is a problem. And that's why we consider that we've got to have an immediate solution for it. We've got to do this, that, and the other. Whereas if we didn't have any of those constraints, then we would be less bothered, perhaps, by the impact it was having. Or indeed, we might consider it the other way around, which is, right, okay, I think I might have overcooked it, and this is my body recalibrating, just doing whatever it needs to do. I mean, this doesn't happen by accident. So I think that there's an awful lot more to it. But like with so many of our discussions, doesn't matter what the subject matter, we are where we are. So the only considerations that we can have are within those confines, which is in some ways eternally frustrating, but also quite interesting because so much of it is to do with what we believe to be the case rather than necessarily knowing for certain.
See, my question, sorry, Jerm, my question for you would be, how have you been abusing yourself? Because one of the things that fascinated me over the years was that I always got a seasonal cold or flu at Christmas. Now, so, this was the end of the year, effectively been running on adrenaline for the full year. And then I'm come December, I'm already thinking about, well, I'm going over to see my folks and it's going to be, holiday time. Everything's winding down. And suddenly, as soon as that pressure comes off, as soon as the normal day-to-day pressure comes off, suddenly this thing hits you. And I'm thinking, well, that's not a coincidence that it happens year after year after year. So there's something that my body is saying something to me about how I'm living my life for the rest of the time. And that as soon as I start to relax, then it says, right, now's the time to sort things out. And so that's my question for you. Have you been doing the same? You living effectively on, under pressure the whole time, and maybe something's happening to cause you to sort of relax a little bit, and then before you know it, you're being hit.
Jerm.
Sorry.
I think.
I know you've got the cold, but you should at least pay attention.
I thought you were talking to Charles. When I mentioned the aspirin earlier, I realized, Charles, that what you were saying is very true. We are in a strange kind of spiral. Okay, so we take an aspirin because we get a very sore head and you become debilitated, right? But it's also, it's a compounded set of symptoms that you keep taking stuff because other stuff's happening. Whereas if you try to go back in that chain of events, to go right back to the foundation, okay, why are these things happening? As opposed to, well, I'm just going to take an aspirin. It's exactly what you were just asking now. I think the same as you, Charles. I think here, for me, I always get sick at around this time of the year because the season changes. There's obviously, the entire environment changes. The sun gets less, it gets colder, whatever. And I think it's just the body, adapting to that. If I go away to...
or have you trained yourself to do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
Because this sort of comes back to what I was saying a second ago. If you are living your life in a way which builds up certain toxins or whatever in your body, and you have trained yourself to, just another example, a really silly thing. The way our routine works when we're doing the news program, this is going back to the previous studios, and I certain tasks happened at certain days, and for some reason I happened to get into the routine of going to the loo just at the same time I was doing something else, and so then we moved to a different location and the routine changes a little bit, but then it didn't matter what time I went to do that same task that I was doing before. At that moment, I suddenly associated that with going to the loo, and suddenly I needed to go to the loo, which I didn't need to do. So it's funny the way, you sort of get into routines of things, and then a certain sensation happens or a certain event happens, and I just wonder whether that's part of what's going on. You've effectively taught yourself, well, at the turn of the season, I'm going to deal with whatever the toxicity in my body is, and you get sick. I'm just throwing that out as a possibility.
I think that's a pretty good argument, actually, because your brain's very powerful. If you listen at all to any of the German new medicine stuff, which I do think, in my view, to some degree has merit, you can make yourself sick. You can train yourself to get sick. You can train yourself to, for example, fall asleep on the couch, and then when you go to bed, you are wide awake, and you all of these patterns. But at the same time, when the season changes, it is coincidental that a whole pile of people at the same time, all get sort of flu-y symptoms. Which I think also makes sense.
Yeah, much as that is because they're being bombarded with advertising for analgesics and Lemsip and other stuff like this.
But not chicken soup.
This is the time you get sick, so they get sick.
Yeah, you're right. There's a nudge there.
Well, I think there are lots of different elements, and I do find it very interesting. I think on the subject of whether or not one trains one's body or mind to sort of be ill at a particular time, or whether you can have a Pavlovian response in some way to a particular set of circumstances. I think the way I would look at it perhaps would be slightly different, in that I consider, exactly like you've just said, Jerm, in so many ways, the body is dictated to by the mind. And when you're in what is, in effect, sort of term time mindset, you know you have to keep going. You know you've got to get this, that, and the other done. And so, Mike, to go back to your point of coming up to taking a break, you know that those things go away, and your mind's requirements to tell your body to keep going and do this, that, and the other retreats, and you can perceive that you're going into a time of relative sort of safety and security, and therefore your system can purge and cleanse itself. Because that, again, that's specifically the way that I would think about it. And I think for me, that's sort of why that happens. It's your mind is finally allowing your body, which has been depleting itself, to finally take that time out and yeah, as I say, purge. Then I think with seasonality, I think there are a number of different things actually, and I think part of it, depending where you are in the world, but ultimately it will be to do, I think, in large part with what sorts of things are in the air, pollens, of course, and all kinds of other things, but also, not to forget, depending on where you live, chemicals. And for the growing seasons in the UK, the agricultural, the arable growing seasons, this is the time of year where a hell of a lot of really nasty chemicals do get sprayed all the time. And actually, even if you're in an urban area, if the wind's blowing in the wrong direction, you're going to get that as well. And I really do think that cannot be ignored, because breathing in, sorry, which it sounds like I've just done, breathing in that kind of thing, when you're close enough to it, which regrettably in the part of the countryside I'm in now, that there are people nearby that do this. And as a side note, I mean, Mike, we were talking about this the other day. I mean, crikey, the absolute absurdity of the process of spending money on these inputs, which are just about death and destruction, killing off viable crops in order to be able to plough ground and then, put synthetic fertilizer. I mean, anyway, the whole thing, to my mind, is insane. I won't necessarily bang that particular drum again, because I know it's probably a bit annoying. But as I say, the point is that, as well as there being new pollens, which in this day and age where we are, I think, less able to deal with stuff that is just there naturally, because everything is, the advent of the kills 99.9% of germs type stuff was absolutely done for people, which is why the increase in hay fever in particular has been exponential. So I think we're less able to deal with that, which I think gives rise to what we described as seasonal flus. But also, I really do believe that if you look at the arable activity, and in particular the spraying of crops at particular times of year, and then put that against when people are typically getting seasonal flus. I'm not trying to say that this is the only reason, but I do think that again is a large part of it.
Well, you said chemicals and you said spraying all kind of at the same time, so you know that's going to just send this conversation downhill. We can't talk about chemicals and spraying.
Yeah, no,
don't you know?
Yeah.
No, but we should. But no, but there is a serious point there, because I know what you're referring to. But the point is that whatever people might think about what's in the skies, it staggers me that nobody is among that those people are concerned, or they don't seem to be concerned about what's being sprayed on the land.
Yeah.
And at the altitudes that we actually live at. And so those chemicals are orders of magnitude worse. Now, to make the point about this, with the caveat that the quantities that are being sprayed are different, but nonetheless, the same chemicals that farmers are using to spray their lands in England, Israel is using to spray land in southern Lebanon in order to kill the farming enterprise there, or any possibility of farming there. So So those same chemicals are being used as a chemical weapon in another part of the world. So why is there no discussion about this? No serious public discussion about the use of these types of chemicals in our farming industry in the UK or in Europe or in the United States?
Yeah,
Well, that's
it is
why-
amazing. Go on, Jerm.
I was going to say that's why people like Angus are very, very important.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, I think people have no idea where this has come from. A book that does give I would say, a very good insight into it is Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which interestingly, I think I'm right, she wrote it. It was published in 1962, and she died in 1963. It is as stark an evaluation of the utter destruction that the agrochemical industry was wreaking on the American landscape, and the years that she was studying. She wrote, I'm confident that it was in 1 year, just prior to publication of the book, that 500 new chemicals were had patents approved. That just in that 1 year, 500 new chemicals to be applied to land. It's just, it is absolutely astonishing. And yet here we are with the Hormuz oil crisis, and of course the cry is, oh well, the food system's going to grind to a halt because we can't create synthetic fertilizer from oil. And okay, again, accepting the fact that we are where we are, and clearly I'm not calling for food shortages, but I mean that should be a sort of right. Okay, well maybe it's time to make another plan then.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that that's exactly what's happening with respect to energy, and every government in the West is saying, right, we got to stop using hydrocarbons, and we got to start
Exactly.
using solar and wind. And yet we're not doing the same. We're not seeing the same discussions over food supply.
Yeah, but
yeah, go ahead.
No, just that is the greatest hypocrisy of all. This. I mean, it totally exposes the way that the environmental campaign has been hijacked. It's totally gone to climate change, and now no one cares a damn about the land, about the soil. Couldn't exemplify it better. I agree with you, Mike.
One of the things that bugs me a lot is the sort of nihilistic, black pill, ultra cynical view that, well, all of our food is contaminated and toxic because of all of these chemicals, etc. But that's not entirely true. I mean, like my friend, as you know, Farmer Angus, makes a huge effort to cleanse his soil and to make it nutrient dense and to make sure that his farming is very, very healthy. You can find healthy food, and I think the defeatist mindset of, well, it's all just bad for you is a terrible place to be.
Well, I totally agree, and I think again it would depend in where in the world one is as to what sort of access you can have to food that is grown in that way. But I do think that there is a greater and greater interest in it, and I mean that both in the sense of people finding it and looking for it, but also the financial side of it, and it's making better and better business sense. That is going back to the fossil fuel, synthetic fertilizer, and all the other inputs. It's ridiculous. Without, certainly in the United Kingdom, without subsidy, there's absolutely no way in which you could farm like that. I mean, it's complete. It is complete mad. Even with subsidy, it's insane. So to think about it differently, and it is, I think, given the financial pressures, it is pretty astonishing that people are still not thinking about it differently. But to provide a different offering, I mean, crikey, we started this conversation with talking about chicken broth. To buy your way out of ill health by simply spending what might on the surface appear to be a little bit more on food is worth every penny. If it means you don't have the types of ailment that you would have if you are consuming things
It's
that
funny
are
though.
produced in the wrong
Yeah,
way.
but it seems to me that if we're talking about health is a holistic thing, and it's not just what the food that we put into our bodies. It's our lifestyles as well. So obviously, getting out, fitness, these types of things are one thing, but the other, the other thing, food related, Charles, is, part of the reason people are so unhealthy at the moment is because of convenience and their unwillingness to learn how to cook for themselves. And it just seems to me that instead of consuming the absolute rot that appears on television, it would be better. Time would be better spent learning to actually cook healthy food. Yes, get the best quality ingredients you possibly can, but stop eating stuff out of packets and jars. That seems to me to be a major area that where people can help themselves very, very quickly and easily.
Well, I mean, I would totally agree, and I wouldn't draw the line there. I mean, I would say any kind of practical skill that seems like it's dying out. I mean, that's being made to die out. All of these things, that anything you can do for yourself is just so incredibly useful. And I don't care what Elon
from a psychological reason, as much as anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
I actually enjoy cooking, to be honest. I find it very relaxing. I mean, I enjoy slicing things with my different knives, and it's just a great way to end the day. Maybe it's because I've got a family now, and that's what I look forward to. But it is also therapeutic. Once you kind of have a recipe and you know where you're going, put it that way, and you've got all these nice fresh ingredients. And by the way, a lot of people think that you need huge amounts of ingredients to be healthy, but it's the other way around. As Tim Noakes always argues, that health generally is equivalent to fewer ingredients. You don't need a bunch of different things. You can be creative with a few things.
Yeah, well, that's, it's, again, conditioning, isn't it? I think Jamie Oliver, he kind of made it fashionable. Sorry for interrupting, but he made it fashionable to have like 500,000 different ingredients for a single meal. I don't know. I think he's probably made a lot of things fashionable that shouldn't be. But yeah, yes, I think it's things like that, though. Things that do have influence through mainstream media channels that do convince people that you absolutely have to have this, that, and the other, and that in a way life is somehow more boring and more prosaic if you aren't eating at least 17 different vegetables every day, and your meat isn't coming from here and there, or if you're still eating meat.
Well, tonight I'm doing swordfish, and it was a fresh piece of swordfish was delivered this morning, literally on ice.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, well, that's great, but if you were in a sort of, if you could catch swordfish whenever you needed to, and you had a freezer or whatever, there's no reason you couldn't live off swordfish for a year, and at the same time not get bored of it. And I think this is the thing: is people, I don't know. I mean, again, it's an individual thing, but sort of being convinced that you should be bored of something if you're having to eat it more than.
But that's what Mike was alluding to. If you get caught up in convenience, you lose creativity, and creativity is where it all comes in. I know that you don't go hunting, but if you hunt a buck, I mean, that is a lot of meat. It'll keep you going for a year, easy. A kudu, for example, is what a few 100 kilos of meat. That is a lot of meat. You need a very, very big amount of freezer space to keep that. But it's healthy, number one. It's quite literally free range, grass fed, and you can be quite creative with it. You don't have to eat the same thing, and you avoid all the boxed or the prepackaged meat.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about that. I can't remember if it's a joke or a story, but the chap who is sitting on the rock catching his fish for his supper and gets convinced to commercialize, and how about if you just created a net, then you could catch fish for others, and you could then sell it, and then you can make a profit, and then you can blah 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 blah. Anyway, the joy that this guy gets, obviously, at the end of the day, is being able to sit on his rock and just watch the sunset. But he takes every step of advice and ends up in some sort of penthouse tower block thing, having made his business empire, but all he is doing is sitting at his desk at the top of his thing, watching the sunset. So it's the same. I mean, this is it. So here we are, 2026, talking about shooting kudu with ballistic weapons. I mean, the result, which is taking pleasure in the natural world and sort of praising it where it's come from and treating all these things with reverence, ultimately is exactly the same as far as we understand, human beings were doing thousands of years ago. It's
the same thing.
We just introduced all the other stuff that we spend hours sort of talking about and being concerned about.
A friend of mine made an interesting comment. He said that human progress is a myth. And that's kind of what you're saying now. We're doing the same thing today as what we did, 1,000 years ago. Just
yes,
the mechanism is different.
Yeah, I don't want to sort of dismiss everything that has changed between now and then, but sometimes there are quite substantial elements of it that do come back to that. We actually are looking for the same things that people were doing before all of this stuff started. So I wouldn't want to oversimplify, but then again,
you see, but Charles, I wouldn't mind the type of progress that we've seen if, because we have all kinds of things which provide convenience in our lives that we didn't have 1,000 years ago. I wouldn't mind that if people used the time that was given to them creatively and constructively and productively, instead of just saying, well, okay, I'll sit in front of the TV now and watch a load of crap. I mean, this is the bit that the benefits that are made available to us by the fact that we have had a certain type of progress are not taken up by the majority of people. And so then you got to ask the question, what's the point?
I know this is it. It's a bit gloomy when you think about it like that. But
sorry,
no, but it's true. This is absolutely it. So we've done the bit where the fisherman was convinced to instead build his empire and flog fish to the masses so that people don't have to go and do that work. But so what are they doing with that time? And exactly as you point out, not very much. And that is just the greatest of all tragedies, really, that people unfortunately can't even see that they are not recouping the benefit of everything that has changed, and that's a terrific tragedy. But then again, you see, isn't it funny? Because going back to where we started with the bone broth and pharmaceuticals, of course, if you were out there instead with either your spear or your bow and arrow, and you having to run the kudu down, then clearly you wouldn't be visiting the little NHS surgery on the corner of the cave, because you wouldn't be unfit, you wouldn't be out of shape, you wouldn't have digestive trouble, this, that, and the other. So as I say, this idea of there being diseases of civilization, it's a terribly perilous environment, because how are you supposed to make the correct choices when at every turn you're being sold the idea of, you must do this, you must wear makeup, you must buy paint stripper to take it off again, you must do, you eat this, you do that, you learn this, you sit down, you do not. I mean, it's a terribly difficult environment to navigate if you're never really put in a position where you have to stop and think about it. And unfortunately, for an awful lot of people in the Western world, and I really am specific about the Western world, because I think if you look, Jerm, I'd be interested in your take on this, but crikey, looking at, and I don't say this to say they're getting it wrong, but it is fascinating in a way watching African men, the amount of time African men give to just sitting and not really doing anything is phenomenal. But also look what's come of that. They have not, okay, you could say, how would they? But this is not as unrealistic as I'm making it sound. They're not just sort of idle layabouts corrupting their minds with junk or their bodies with whatever. It is, I think there is a very interesting distinction between the supposedly developed West, where actually all that's been developed is the propaganda, or the shroud of propaganda that convinces people that they're doing the right things with their life, I know that sounds extraordinarily judgmental and that I know best. So that's not how I mean this at all. I just mean that when you consider what's basically been gifted to people on a plate and what they're actually doing with that incredible time privilege, the results are pretty underwhelming in the majority.
Actually, that's a good kind of underlying theme that you're raising there, Charles. Health also is very connected to, I think, your degree of happiness. If you consider the amount of people that rely on antidepressants and all sorts of medication and all sorts of quick fixes and things, right? I can't remember now the exact year, it doesn't really matter. It was during the COVID years. I, a few times, went to Zululand. If you don't know where that is, it's sort of on the right-hand side of South Africa. It's kind of near a city called Durban. It's a kingdom. It's effectively a kingdom, and it's part of the country, but it's quite kind of independent in the way it operates. And I went there a few times for reasons I won't get into now. And it's extremely rural. I mean, literally huts, no cell phone towers. Pretty much nothing. There's a little shop. If you go to the one village that I was at, for example, there's a little shop. But here's the thing. Everybody is happy and healthy. And there's a strange kind of dichotomy that occurs here where you come from the city and you got your car and everything. And then you go here and they've got goats outside their little hut. And it's extreme simplicity. And yet the people there live till old, 100 years, 105, 110 years old. And it's a very physical lifestyle. And there definitely is something to that, Charles, that there is a sense of happiness that comes from that guy sitting on the rock, looking out of the ocean or whatever he was looking at. That simplicity leads to increased well-being.
I think so. But then again, I feel this is a bit of a problematic line to walk, because here I am sitting in a place where I could
you can't change it.
Yeah. Well, also, but it's not really for me to say, oh yeah, there you go. I tell you what, you're far better off doing this. You don't want any of these sorts of things, and nor should you have them. That is not what I mean by it at all. But I think that's a very interesting observation you make. It's the same thing I've seen all over the world. You see communities of people who, through the eyes of the West and the United Nations sort of development programs stuff, they have nothing. They need this, that, and the other. Well, but why do they need it? What is it that they actually will benefit? What will be the benefit of having the things that have been produced in countries where, as you say, rates of suicide, depression, health, everything are off the charts? I mean, how is it exactly that we are selling the lifestyle that we in the West have created for ourselves? What does it have going for it? It's a really difficult one to argue, but at the same time, because of all the sort of, treating them like noble savages, or it's the white privilege, I don't know what you call it, but for us to say, yeah, well, look, we've got it, we think it's rubbish, don't do it. The advice is don't do it, but more than that, actually, we're not going to let you do it, or you shouldn't do it. It's a difficult, it's sort of a difficult debate to have. I mean, it's actually not entirely dissimilar to parts of the Bible. I mean, certainly the book of Samuel, where the pursuit of, the people who wanted a king, and the absolutely insistent rejoinder, which was, well, don't have a king. The king will only take from you. And it's I don't know, it reminds me of that. But of course it is difficult, because you could say that for Zulus, it's not been a choice. They haven't, they don't get a truck full of sort of televisions coming in there every week and ultra processed stuff and somebody saying, look, here, you can have this if you want. And they've deliberately said, no, thanks. It's just that life at this moment, fortunately, I would say for them, has not got to the point where those things have become a possibility. And there are still, there are still some parts of the world that are like that. I think what would be this would be an easier conversation to have if they had, I suppose, like the Amish people, let's say, if they had actually deliberately rejected it and they had deliberately chosen to live in huts with goats, and there we go.
But it is what it is. I mean, when I was there, they don't have debt because a lot of what I saw was bartering. So in other words, you'll have goats or you'll have cows or something, and if you've got a lot of cows in this one village, it's a sign of wealth. And they trade like that. The one old lady that I went to visit, I think she was like 92 years old or something. Her husband died like 20 years ago, and she has all these fruit trees. And I think she's got 2 hectares of various fruit trees that she grows. And the community comes and feeds from those trees as a form of barter. And then they bring her meat or whatever. And there's just no debt. Now, obviously, that's something that we can't do because we are not in that. We're not in that paradigm anymore. Ever. But it reminds me of that question that I think I've asked you before. But it's a wonderful question: is a bushman poor? And the answer obviously is, well, it depends. It depends on what you're comparing him to. If you're putting him in the middle of London, then sure, yeah, he's poor. But if you go to the Kalahari Desert where he is, you're probably the one who's poor.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I've totally forgotten what I was going to say.
And because he runs a lot, he's probably fitter than you too.
Without doubt.
There's no probably about it.
Yes. Speaking of which, Mike, you were saying the other day that you're getting back into some fitness.
Well, no, it's not that I'm getting back into some fitness. I'm definitely still not doing enough, frankly. Because, I mentioned this before. I made a decision 2 or 3 years ago that the absolute sedentary nature of what I do, because we spend so much time sitting at a desk or whatever, staring at a computer screen, that this was not good. Everybody was aware of how not good it was, but also my diet was not good. So that has partly been resolved, but the, definitely I'm still not, doing enough, active activity. I need to find more time for that. But that's just a matter of choice.
Tim Noakes said to me, well, I'm essentially getting back on my show. He said, he's a sports scientist, so he's very, very into fitness. And he says, look, if you work in the city, and if you're working in a building or something, you don't have to take the lift, take the stairs. These are very easy solutions, but people are too lazy. If you're on the 8th floor, that's brilliant. You're gonna get in a lot of steps.
It's absolutely, and I have direct experience that. I had going back to the thing. Actually, I did not have pharmaceuticals, but I had to have a bit of sort of dodgy cartilage cut out of my leg ages ago, out of my knee, and the classic sort of health service. Here you go. This is how you do your recovery. What the question to ask at that point is to anyone giving you the advice is, oh, and have you had this done to yourself? Have you been through this? Because the answer will always be no. Well, how do you know it works then? Don't know. How really having your leg sort of cut open and whatnot does degrade it somewhat. Years ago, I then worked in Ukraine for a while, 132 steps up, and I went up and down that staircase at least 3 times a day. And within, I think, 2 months, I had never felt better or stronger in my leg. I mean, it was an absolute joy. So yes, I totally agree. I think this is where we really do need to think. And actually, if you look at a society, this is one thing that struck me. Sorry if I've said this before, but there was a great trend. I was at a school teaching English as a foreign language, and there was a trend, a very obvious trend, that youngish single men from the United Kingdom or the United States would go to countries like Ukraine or sort of Eastern European countries, and invariably they would acquire a native wife or girlfriend, many of whom were very, very beautiful and whatnot. But the one thing that really struck me coming from the UK was the shape that people were in, and it was totally different. There basically weren't any fat people. And then you look at why that is, and mostly because they are walking up and down big staircases, even in the urban environment, or they walk everywhere, but also they don't have Hoover vacuum cleaners. They clean with brushes, made from those brilliant, like proper brushes made of little branches and whatnot. So there's physical activity going on the entire time. And going back to your point about cooking, just the whole lifestyle was conducive to good, sort of mental health. Let's say you're feeling positive because you're always engaged doing something, but physically as well, people were always doing stuff, and it was just very, very interesting observation. Sorry, just to jump back totally, but again, thinking of this, just the cynicism and the corrupting influence of the West on the sorts of places that we're talking about, with their sort of livestock as commodity lifestyle. Isn't it amazing that in terms of compensation, because you certainly anywhere that the British Army has operated and has caused damage to civilian communities, particularly livestock, what is the compensation? If you kill 10 of somebody's cows, it's not right, well, we will replace the 10 cows. It's, we will give you cash. Well, what are we supposed to do with that? Or at least they know, it is absolutely known that will have a corrupting influence. I don't mean that it will turn people into dishonest folk, but it will corrupt in that it's most likely to create a pressure that will encourage them to deviate from the lifestyle that they were leading. And it's just another thing. Okay, admittedly, difficult to be able to conjure 10 cows out of nowhere, but not impossible. Go further afield. You've got the transport, you've got whatever. You can absolutely go to a market and acquire 10 cattle and take, 10 head of cattle and take them. But this is the way it's done. And it's across the board. It's militaries, but also it's all the corporate interference. We've obviously talked a lot about South Africa, Anglo-American, this and the other. Whenever any of these things happen, the result is that what gets foisted upon the local population is the Western solution. It's not the one that they would have gone for. If somebody killed 10 of your goats, they replace them with 10 goats. They don't replace it with, $200 a pop. It's not how it works. And yet somehow that seems acceptable. It absolutely isn't. Sorry, that was the thing I was trying to think about.
I think that the idea of health is very interwoven into, as Mike said, as you said at the beginning, it's all holistic, and it isn't a quick fix. You can't take a pill and be healthy, and you can't inject something in your arm and be healthy for the next 20 years. You have to.
No, the pill's going to make you feel better for a short period of time, but you're just pushing the can down the road, but in the meantime you're adding new toxins and new poisons in, because aside from the active ingredient, which you might argue helps deal with the specific symptom, the list of side effects on the information sheet is not there for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, where I was going with that is that we have become a society of treating symptoms. So you have something and you treat that, and then you get something else to treat that. And what we should be doing is pulling back from all of that and going to the root and going, okay, well, why do I get sick? Is it because I am running on adrenaline the whole time? And then, or is it because I'm expecting to get sick at a certain time and kind of training myself to get sick? You have to go back to the root. And I think you can probably be quite successful at recalibrating your own wiring. But it takes a lot of work. And unfortunately, as we've said over and over and over, it's inconvenient.
But everything worthwhile takes a bit of work, and everything that's worthwhile is inconvenient. And, at the end of the day, this is all coming down to a choice. Because whether somebody wants to just sit and veg in front of a television and eat crisps and other junk food, or whether they want to do something that, they learn a new skill or whatever. Where's the biggest benefit to us as individuals? I would rather not be consuming what somebody else tells me. I think I'm going to find somebody else tells me I'm going to find entertaining. We need to relearn how to create our own entertainment, and that, of course, is part of, from a health standpoint, it can only be a benefit.
I mean, if you just spend like an hour every day in the sun, you just feel better.
Sun? What's that?
Oh, right. Okay.
Steady eating.
You unfortunate folks there in the UK. I have lots of sun, even during winter. We don't have any white lines in the sky. Even am I allowed to say that? Or am I going to get
what level of rainfall do you have in the winter?
Well, let me look now quickly. So right now it's 16 degrees. So for you, that's a nice day, isn't it? But that's quite cold here. It doesn't ever go below 1 or 0 here in Cape Town, just so you know. So we don't get snow. Level of rainfall. Well, the whole week here is raining, but it says here 75%. Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm thinking more in terms of quantity.
Annual.
Oh no!
Annual
No, I don't know. No, I don't know. We have enough. I mean, everything goes green. Put it that way. And our dams are all full. If that's what you're kind of leading to, we don't have any issues with water shortages. We had water shortages a few years ago, but that, I argue, was management, not because of lack of rain.
Well, yeah, that is. Yeah. I think in any supposedly developed country, that is the only reason for a water shortage.
Yeah, it's broken pipes or infrastructural damage or deliberate or whatever. Sabotage doesn't really matter, but I don't think it's an issue with rain itself.
Yeah, I would totally agree.
Just quickly, before we close off, I asked at the beginning of the conversation how you pronounce migraine. It turns out that the British way of saying it is migraine and the American way is migraine. So I'm going to say migraine because of my Commonwealth roots. I try to avoid the Americanization of language.
Are you sure you want to claim your Commonwealth roots?
I'm okay with that. Rather that than the Americanization of stuff. I mean, they don't even speak
no problem
English.
with the pronunciation. I'm questioning whether you want to claim Commonwealth roots. Is this you?
Well, that is it is what it is.
You want to maintain your connections to the empire. Is that right?
Ooh, that's a trap.
That's
a trap. I shan't answer.
Chicken.
Speaking of chicken, I'm going to go have some.
And
go and have some chicken broth.
After this discussion, you sound much better. Are you feeling much better?
I think just because it's daytime, but give me a few hours and I'll probably feel lousy again.
Yeah. No, in fact, on a serious note, sorry, because I was going to just chip that in with the idea that there can be another way and it's not a quick fix and there isn't necessarily a pill or an injection or a program or this, that and the other. It does the first thing, and I know I say this all the time, but I really do believe it. You can't do any of that unless you're completely convinced that it will sort you out. I think even being ambivalent towards it, sort of, I'll give it a go and see what happens. If you're not actually into it, if you're not thinking positively about it, it won't happen. And that is the hardest part of all, is to convince yourself. If you are in, I would say, the unfortunate position of being told that you have a particular condition for which you need a particular drug, and you can't see that there's an alternative, or you think, well, if there is an alternative, it's got to work pretty quickly, and I don't really know what's going to happen, then I don't see that it will work. I think it's got to be a lot more positive. It's got to be a much, much stronger thought process than that.
Let me give you a quick anecdote to feed into what you're saying. A friend of mine lives in the UK, and he immigrated, he and his family, years ago. His father was diagnosed with leukemia in January, and it was pretty bad. They said that he had 6 to 12 months left to live, and that's a whole discussion on its own. Whether the doctor should be telling you that, I don't know. I don't know what the ethics are around that. But nonetheless, he didn't tell the doctors that he skipped the chemo, right? He said no to that, but he didn't tell the doctors what he was doing privately. He went onto a carnivore diet, and today he's back home cooking supper, and his leukemia has gone into remission. He's back at home.
Well,
And of course, that's not medical advice.
That's not medical
That is
advice.
not
No.
medical advice,
I'm just
no.
telling you. I'm telling you a story.
and
That-
and there are a lot of stories like that, which is, one would say very, very encouraging. But clearly, all of those things are a decision for the individual.
But I think it's a great way to end the conversation. It is a wonderfully uplifting story in a real life event.
Absolutely.
And
But I
I
think-
think
Yeah, sorry, but just to say, I think he has done that. He has been able to achieve that because he was certain in his mind
yes,
that he knew
yes,
where he
exactly.
was going with it.
The NHS obviously was advising him differently, so he was just
Sure.
nodding and smiling.
Yeah.
But is it it's the NHS? Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
The National Health Service. There we go. Yeah. But nonetheless, and then recently they were telling him to eat cake and sugary stuff, and he said, "What? That makes no sense." But anyway, on that note, Charles, Mike, been a pleasure. Thank you for doing the heavy lifting. I'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks, Jerm.
Jerm.